Really wanted to spread my wings and discover what was out there in the world. And I have done that, I think. I think I've done that. I've studied in the US, but I've also been to China several times. So even before I moved to China after my degree and my 2 years working in college admissions, I had traveled to China as a teenager for a Global Young Leaders Conference. And that actually really opened my eyes and changed my perspective, not just on China as a culture and a society, but just on how big and different the world is, and how many different ways there were to live and to experience things.
Hi everyone, welcome to 北腔南调, aka Cultural Collision. I'm Melody.
I'm Victoria.
And today we have a dear friend joining us to share his career transition journey from working in the field of education to becoming a software engineer. Born and raised in a country of only 1.5 million people, Jayson left Trinidad and Tobago for Massachusetts for university. After graduating and working as a university admissions rep in the States, he made the leap to move across the world to Beijing, China, where he allowed his uni rep expertise to shine as an international admissions counselor. Jayson will be graduating from Swinburne University of Technology very soon with a Master's of Information Tech and has shifted his career focus to software development. Welcome, Jayson.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Thanks. So, Jayson, do you want to give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Awesome. Yeah. So everything you said was true. I did do my undergraduate degree in Massachusetts, specifically at Amherst College in Western Massachusetts, small liberal arts college, majored in physics and philosophy. So completely different to everything I went on to do, which has been, I think, really important for me as well as I've kind of moved to interests and careers and locales, kind of following my passions and the things that I discover I really love doing. So grew up, was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago, which is this tiny little boot-shaped country around Venezuela at the tail end of the Caribbean, and had a really great life there, had a really great start to my academic life and world, and really wanted to spread my wings and discover what was out there in the world. And I have done that, I think. I think I've done that. I've studied in the US, but I've also been to China several times. So even before I moved to China after my degree and my 2 years working in college admissions, I had traveled to China as a teenager for a Global Young Leaders Conference. And that actually really opened my eyes and changed my perspective, not just on China as a culture and a society, but just on how big and different the world is, and how many different ways there were to live and to experience things. So I got that experience. And then I also traveled to the UK, to Suriname. I used to play chess, so I would travel competitively for some competitions. I was part of the Commonwealth Youth Parliament, so I got to debate in the House of Lords in the UK. Lots of different experiences growing up before I even left for university really encouraged me to go out there and see what the world had on offer. All this to say, I've been around a lot of places, and I really love the idea of this podcast and just this idea of cultural collision and what combining cultures and experiences can allow us to do. And yeah, really happy to get to spend time with not only people who I respect and think really highly of, but people who I also think of as friends. So thank you for inviting me.
Jayson, you're so interesting and you've truly lived everywhere and have experienced so much. And so we're really excited to learn about your career transition from education to becoming a software developer today. But I want to bring us back to the very beginning. I mean, you come from a country of only 1.5 million people. Not many people leave to study abroad. And then after going to the States, you then really travel the whole world. So I wonder, how did your upbringing impact your initial career choice and initial decision to leave Trinidad?
I think that's a really important question. And I think in many ways, growing up, I was pulled in two different directions, right? So, like you said, Trinidad and Tobago, wonderful place, really strong, primary and secondary education. And so a lot of people graduate high school and are really ready and able to go out into the world and study. But a lot of people decide not to do that. And I think it's because life in Trinidad, in the Caribbean, in many ways, it's a very particular kind of life that some people really, really enjoy. Like it's beautiful weather, it's beaches, it's carnival, it's all these things that people who haven't lived in the Caribbean and like they're like, why are you here in the middle of winter in Massachusetts? You're from the Caribbean. This is where everyone wants to go, right? So there's a real impetus to stay and to do your university degree there, to find a job there, to settle down. At the same time, there's also this impetus to use that education that you've gotten to go out into the world and to make some kind of difference and impact. So those two things, I feel as though were always pulling me in opposite directions. So I decided in the end to make the change. I was a national scholarship winner. So every year, our country distributes or at least at that time, distributed a couple hundred scholarships for like the top performing students in the advanced examinations. So I was one of the scholarship winners for that year, which meant that I could go to the local university free of charge. In fact, they would practically pay me to go to university because I'd get like a living stipend and like my tuition would be covered. So I applied and got into local university. I was like, okay, cool, maybe I'll do that. But I think in the back of my mind, I was always like, maybe I will not do that. And then I also got into the University of British Columbia to study physics. And then I applied to many, many schools in the US, got denied by many schools, got waitlisted by several. And then the last day of college decisions was when Amherst released their decision. And I remember being at a friend's house and just like casually opening the email because I've gotten so many denials at that point. I was like, oh, it's just going to be another deny. And I remember like opening that letter and seeing the word yes, exclamation point, and how that made me feel. That was tremendous. And then I didn't know very much about small liberal arts culture and what it meant to go to a school like Amherst. And it was only after reading that letter and then be like, okay, all right, maybe I can. And then looking at the financial aid letter, oh my gosh, that was also very exciting because Amherst really, even though it's a very expensive institution to go to, they really helped me afford the cost of going to college there. So kind of two problems that I had thinking about like the money problem and also thinking about wanting to kind of go out there and experience the world were solved by Amherst, for which I am eternally grateful. I do want to say like, my family is still very much in Trinidad and based in Trinidad, but I still feel as though despite missing them and wanting to be with them from time to time, especially when big things happen. My grandma's 90th birthday was last week and I was in Australia. Like at the same time, I also know that this was the right choice for me because it's let me become a version of myself that I think the younger version of me would be very proud of, which is I think that's a really great feeling or a great imagining I have about my life right now.
So you now still remember like when you got the offer from Amherst College, right? Like how they support you, how excited you were. Probably that's one of the reasons like you are in education industry after you graduated.
That is actually really very true. I think if I hadn't gone to a school like Amherst, I would not have really thought about education maybe I wouldn't even have thought of education as an industry. Like I would have thought about it as like, oh, I got my education so I got my degree so I could go work and like kind of like skip over thinking about like what does it mean to be educated and what does it mean to be an educator. Amherst really pushed me not only to like learn and study and all the stuff that go along with being in college, but really pushed me to think about what it means to really be educated and like how that impinges on like your morality and your sense and vision of the world and your personal happiness. And it really inspired me to want to have, I wouldn't say it's like inspired me to want to make everybody want to be like me, but rather to want everybody to have the experience of getting to understand what it means to be educated, right? So I the job that really brought me into the field was the admissions job at Amherst College. And I remember at that point in my life, I was doing interviews for consulting, getting to like the second round, but not really making it all the way. And I wasn't really looking for the Amherst job, but one of my really closest, dearest friends, who actually also you both know, is Tanya. Yeah, Tanya was actually the one who was like, because at the time she was working at the Amherst admissions office, and she sat me down. She's like, you'd be really great for college admissions. I was like, "Ah, really, me? I don't know anything about college admissions." Um, and then I decided, okay, I'll put my name in the hat. I'll interview, and I got to the interview, and it was the entire admissions office interviews every candidate for the job I was applying for. So all the deans, all the director of admissions, everybody was there. And it was the most fun I have ever had in an interview. Like, it was just like story time. It was like a riot. We hit it off immediately. So like 2 days later, they called me up and they're like, "You have the job." Like, just do you want the job? And I'm like, actually, yes. And so that's how I got into college admissions. It wasn't that I had this really clear idea, like I want to be an educator, I want to change the state of it. Like, it wasn't any of that. It was like I went into this interview with these people that I had only known tangentially because they were the ones who, let me into the college. But I realized when I actually met them that, like, oh, these are the people who are like empowering people all over the world to get this experience of being educated like I was. And I was like, you guys are cool people. Those were 2 really important years. And they set me on that particular path, I think.
So,
Yeah.
having worked in the field of education, specifically in like college admissions for over 5 years, why did you ultimately decide to jump to the field of engineering?
I think there are a lot of little reasons why I decided to move to engineering and software development specifically. But I think the thing that kind of it all added up to was that my time in education made me realize the aspects of work that I was most passionate about. And it made me realize that the thing that I'm most passionate about is most valued is in the technical field. So maybe to summarize, I would say the thing that I really learned in my time at UWest about me as an individual, an individual in my working life, is that I'm somebody who likes complicated, big projects. And I like managing like really complex, difficult projects, which is ultimately, Melody, maybe you would also agree with me on this. As a strategy counselor, that's what you're doing.
I loved it.
Yeah. But that's the part that I really loved. I loved working with the students, and I loved like mentoring them and learning from them as I was teaching them and helping them their apps. But I really love thinking like big picture and thinking strategy and then executing. And so transitioning to a different world, I thought about, okay, what are the fields where I can really love big, complicated projects and find like a lot of opportunities for jobs and career advancement. And I really landed on technology. I hadn't been a software person before that. I had in the past like done some short courses on like languages like JavaScript, but I hadn't really taken it very seriously. I was like, that's software stuff. It's for other people. But then I realized as I started my degree and I started learning about technology and kind of the state of it, that there are actually lots of ways you can do complicated big projects in the world of technology. And while some of them do have to do with coding and like writing software, a lot of them actually have to do with thinking about the relationship between the people who want the software and the people who are making the software. So there's a very human element to software engineering that I'm finding that my experience in education, my background in education and dealing with people and in consulting really speaks to, like a need to understand the client, understand the process, and like bring those things together. I love it. It's great. I really am excited about my future career in this.
You do really think about it like from education to engineering, think about these questions that you ask yourself, like what you can do and what you're really interested in. You find out your passion during the previous job, right? How did you prepare for the career transition? Like, what are some of the most challenging things you've encountered during the transition?
I would say the most challenging thing I've encountered is just feeling as though I'm starting from scratch in, my late 20s, early 30s. I think a lot of it has to do with just like seeing everyone who was like a pair in my life at Amherst now be in their career like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and me being like, okay, now I'm going to start over. Now I'm going to be like a baby. Like I'm going to take the classes that I should have taken in my second year of Amherst College. Now 10 years later, and so it's kind of this internal struggle where it's like, should I really be restarting now? But in fact, the learning has not been that hard. The courses have not been that hard. It's a lot. And I feel as though I'm just discovering things about this technological world that we live in that I feel as though I should have known it before. Like there are things about like big data and things about like data structures and algorithms. I'm like, I really should have known this before, but I'm learning it now. And that's been fun. And the projects have been great. And I've also gotten the opportunity to teach. So I'm actually an academic tutor at Swinburne, as well as being a master's student in cloud computing. So I'm getting to learn a lot about that whole world. So the course itself and that entry has been fun and has been enlightening. I think the hardest part is coming over the internal struggle of like, what am I doing? I should just like do education because that's what I've done before. And that would make the most sense, right? Yeah.
I just watched a video about the situation, like the phenomena in China. I don't know, like if the same for the other countries, probably not, right? So the engineer, especially in the IT technology industry, for people like at the age of 35, like and they're older than 35, it's really hard for them to find a job. And even for HR, they feel like young people are more passionate and they don't want like people in their mid 30 or like late 30s. Do you really even like considering this as a factor if you transfer now, like and how you're gonna face the challenge you're gonna face in the future?
I would say that yes, there's definitely this sense of like, if you are young and just graduated and you have like the CS degree, or you've just like, or you've built a website or something like that, like there's a sense like, oh, this person's passionate and enthusiastic, and like we want them on our team for like this very big mega company, and they're brilliant and they know their algorithms and data structures. And I'm like, that's great. That is not the job that I want though. And so I'm in my 30s. I've done that job, right? Like I've done the you throw your entire life into your work and it's just like, we want you to be part of the family, part of the culture. Yeah, we all have had that experience. It then becomes like, what is my expectations for a job in my 30s? And if I'm looking for that experience, then, I'm going to have an uphill battle. But if I'm looking for an experience where I'm working either with like a small team on like a very niche project that really values kind of the methodical, careful, considered approach to software engineering, or if I'm looking for a project that is not necessarily a startup, but that's somewhere in that phase of transitioning out of like a startup into like a more mid-sized company and really needs not just the expertise, but just that ability to work in a team and navigate the complexities of that, I think I'll be fine. I will talk to you about that in, 6 to 8 months when I get my first job. There are many jobs out there and I can apply for everyone. And I think that's most people's approach when they're thinking about their career, to just find what sticks. But I'm really in a position, and I'm fortunate to be in a position where I get to be a little bit discerning about what it is I'm going to do next and how I want to use this degree to build my next career.
Both of you kind of just touched upon this as well, but there is that challenge of potentially, I guess, quote unquote, competing with somebody who has studied this field for a long time. How do you prepare yourself to be on the same playing field as people who have studied this in undergrad? And then on the other hand, what kind of skills do you feel that you have found transferable from your former to present career?
So I've been through the interview process a couple times now in tech, actually. So since I landed in Australia last year, January, I've applied for internships. I've applied for different kinds of opportunities. I spent the summer doing an internship with a startup company here. I'm currently doing another internship with a mid-level company, all in software development. And then I also got the job at Swinburne doing cloud computing. Throughout this process of applying to different opportunities, I've been leaning a lot on two things in the tech in for these technology-based opportunities. One of them is having had a full working life up to this point. So I have experienced many things in my previous career in college admissions, in my previous career in college counseling, as a manager, as a like bottom of the rung grunt employee, and as somebody who's done freelance work, as somebody who's tutored. Like, I draw on all of these experiences when I'm talking about, especially in behavioral interviews. I think these are really, really critical. And so that part is really handled by my past experience and my past life. But when it comes to the technical stuff, I find myself, even though that's harder, right? Because I don't have those years and years of experience coding, etc. I find that I also do really well there. And mostly because I always go into these interviews like very prepared. So this last internship opportunity that I got, they gave us a technical exercise that was basically, here is this very abstract technology concept called domain-driven design. Now, I'm going to give you a week. Try to figure out how you would do this project in this paradigm that is still very ethereal. There's not really much written on it. I just want you to like look at this database, take this data, write some mutations and some queries that are in this paradigm. And I'm like, yes, please. That's great. That's what I want to do. I don't want to solve data structures and algorithms and like loop through things. Like, that's not interesting to me. What's interesting is like doing something that's not been done before, finding ways to make it make sense to myself, and then trying to achieve the goal of the task using this like paradigm. Like, that to me is really exciting. So I spent way more time than I should have on that assignment. And then by the end, I had like this long report about, I was able to achieve this, but I still don't know how to do this. And like, this works and I got it to work, but I wasn't able to implement this. And they were like, cool, you got the internship. And I think to me, that's kind of to your previous question as well, Victoria. That's the kind of company I'm looking for. I wouldn't want to work for a technology company that's just like a startup that just wants to go fast and like break everything and just wants to like, can you write JavaScript at like 20 like lines per minute kind of thing. That's not really what I'm looking for next. I'm really looking for these places that really value the curiosity and the wanting to explore and change and develop new ways of doing the work. That's really exciting to me. And I found opportunities to do that even as somebody now coming into the field.
I think like you're really at a stage, really know what you want with your experience and your knowledge. You know what you are pursuing. Because I feel like the most people right now, like when we're trying to look for jobs, for example, like we transition to another career, we're like looking for jobs. We were looking for what job can I do instead of like what job I want to do. A lot of jobs, like basic skills, like you said, like coding is not that important. It's not that hard, right? You can do coding, but that's not really what you want. And now the job, you can really show your strengths to the company. Yeah. So like for your experience, do you think what is important for someone to consider when choosing a career path?
Wow, this is a near and dear to my heart kind of question, both as an educator, right, and as somebody who's doing it. I have so many thoughts about the ways that you can approach it, but I will just give my most recent kind of thinking about it. There's this book I read this year by two Stanford professors, actually the Stanford professors who are, heads of the design lab at Stanford, the Stanford design program. And they have this really incredible book called Designing Your Life. And it takes their students, Stanford students, and then everybody as well, through this process of really drilling down to try to answer that question. And I mean, more than that question, they want you to think about your whole life and your work as just part of that. But a lot of it is dedicated to this idea of like, how do you find what it is that you're really passionate about? Because when you pursue their thinking, I think essentially is that when you find yourself pursuing that on a regular basis in a way that is kind of fulfilling and sustainable, that is when you're like, I'm living the life. It's not when you make like $2 billion. It's not when you are able to retire at 30. It's when you're doing things that you feel are worthwhile and earning and living the kind of life that you want to do at the same time. So I guess at the core of that idea, it's giving yourself the time and space to explore. And this is me taking a swing back to the educator side. I think one of the things I was most passionate about while I worked in college admissions, while I worked in education consulting, was that kids need the time and space to explore. And when they don't have that, maybe it works out. Maybe sometimes it does work out. And the kids are like, I want to be an engineer. And then they're just do engineer their entire life and they're happy. But when it doesn't, like it could be disastrous because you can find yourself in a career that you've invested all this time, all this energy in, and feel as though this is all you've ever prepared to do. And you don't even know what's out there. You don't even know that there are other possibilities. And so I think it's really about giving yourself permission, but then also taking the time to experiment. And there are easy ways to run those experiments, right? The first easy way is just like talk to people who already do it and be like, oh, so tell me more about your life. Tell me more about what you do. How is your day in the life? Or even just watch YouTube videos, because now there are YouTube videos for all these things. But then the next step would be like, okay, can I volunteer in something related to this? Or can I get like an internship in something related to this? Really go in with the sense of like, let's just see. And let's just see for like 2 weeks, or let's just see for a month. And if you find that like, wow, okay, this actually really resonates with me, then you can pursue it even further and then you can like explore that branch. But always with that sense of like, I can take it or I can leave it. And being able to make that choice of like taking it or leaving it is important. I think that's my biggest piece of advice. I know that it's hard many times, not just because getting a job and being able to work is something that's very anxiety inducing for a lot of people, but I also think society makes it hard. Parents make it hard. Like everyone is more than ready to tell you what you should do with your life and your job. And so there are these practical concerns you have to weigh up against. So in your 20s, explore. Be poor and explore. Like don't tie yourself to a career you're going to do for the rest of your life in your 20s. It's like dating even. Like you're not like looking for the love of your life when you're like 16 and 17. You need the time to explore. It's the same thing with your career and the rest of your life, right? So don't be too quick to commit, and also know that you can always like take a step back and reassess, and give yourself that freedom when you're young if possible.
That was such great advice because I think we're often moving forward, trying to think about what's happening next and always trying to one up ourselves as well. But that might not be the best thing for us in the moment. And so, really stepping back, taking a pause, looking around to see like what is happening rather than just being so stuck in the moment is so important. It gives us the clarity that we need to move in the right direction.
I feel so. I feel that has been true for me at least. And I hope that other people who have had similar and different experiences find that it's true for them as well.
Yeah, I really love all the advices, like suggestions you just said, especially give it a try, give it a see in a couple of weeks and see how it works, right? We are so desperate to find the love of our career path, right? Like I need to find my passion, right? That's so difficult. It's so difficult, like find the right person, right? How you gonna find the right path for you if you haven't tried like dozens choices, right? Like you won't know what you want.
I totally agree. And actually, that is one of the things in the book, that they're like, do not find your passion. Like just don't. And that entire thing about finding your passion, just don't do it. Because that is like really, that's the trap, right? It's like, oh, there's this one thing that if I just find it, it will fulfill me for the rest of my life. Nothing really works that way. No.
I would say like doing this podcast really find my passion, but passion is not equals to your career path, right? This is something
Yes.
like other than my job, I'm not doing this for life. This is my passion, but you don't have to like connect your passion to your like career path.
I would say again, like the analogy of relationships is very good. It's like there may be people that you really enjoy spending time with, that you really love, that you really connect with. That doesn't mean that you should marry them, or that doesn't mean you should date them necessarily. That is, I think, equally true here.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to have the conclusion with 3 questions we normally ask. So our first question is, what is your advice for someone who is interested in making a career transition?
So I'll give my general advice and then I'll give specific advice for technology. Think about what inspires you in what you already do and use that as the starting point, right? So for me, it was understanding for myself that it's like the project management part and the dealing with people part and the connection part. Like once I got like, this is what I really enjoy doing, then it was very easy for me to be like, okay, what careers do I get to do this all the time? And then it kind of helped me narrow that list because yeah, there are a lot of jobs you can do in the world, and a lot of ways you can be gainfully employed. And technology is, a really important one, and also one that is still growing and still looking for people, even though, ChatGPT is going to change that. It's not going to make it any less true. So I think that is the first piece of advice, just in general. Start with where you're at. Start with what already makes you passionate. And if you're not passionate about anything, you got to find that before you start, because then you will at least know something is pulling you in the right direction. And then for technology specifically, it's not about learning languages. It's not about learning frameworks, although all of those things are required. So if you don't love learning, technology is not, it's not it for you, because you're constantly asking questions. You constantly are in a state of not knowing enough. And so you have to be like willing to go out and learn. But for technology specifically, I would say do projects. It's actually a lot of work to do a project and to get it to work actually and to have it be really a thing. But there's also nothing that is going to teach you as much as doing a project. So I think about my degree, I think about this master's in IT that I'm doing, I think about all the courses. My favorite courses have always been the project-based courses. Like that is where I'm like, yes, I get to build something. Like I get to do something cool. And then by the end of it, they're also the ones I learn the most because I'm able to then talk to somebody about like how I did this very specific thing in this very specific coding language. I'm not a master in that language. I know enough to like do the basic stuff, but then I had to research and learn how to do that very specific thing. And that allows me to talk at a really high level about what it is that I'm doing. And then it's evolved to this point where I'm now doing personal projects. So I've been reached out to by like organizations in Beijing who are like, can you help us develop this app? And so I spent the last 5 months developing this like custom application in React Native, which is like this really popular language for developing iOS and Android devices. And it's been fun and I've learned so much. It's been stressful, but I've learned so much. And I feel as though this experience is a really great jumping off point. So anytime someone in an interview asks me like, oh, when have you like managed like a complex project, or when have you like used a database to like, I would like, let me tell you, how many hours do you have? I will tell you in grievous detail how I was able to do these things. So that would be my big advice. Just start making things, even little things, and then use that as the jumping off point.
Amazing. And how has traveling and living around the world impacted your view on life and career? I mean, you just spoke about how a company in Beijing reached out to you to develop an app, and that probably sparked from your time in Beijing. So how has living around the world and meeting people around the world impacted your career and life?
It's made it better is the short answer. The longer answer would be it's people. And you guys are a wonderful example of that. Like you talk about, that experience of like getting the opportunity to develop an app for a company based in Beijing. That is true. But I also get the opportunity to be on this podcast and to talk to you both. And we may never have crossed paths ever. Like probably, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, probably the only Trinidadian person,
Yes.
And so my very circuitous route to the US and then to China and now to Australia, it's put me in contact with people. And so like I can call up friends in Beijing. Actually, I recently had a problem where I needed to get a very specific police clearance document from China. And all I needed to do was think through, okay, who are my Chinese friends? And then think about, okay, can I ask this person to do it? I had to ship my passport to China, which I was very anxious about because I'm like, I'm in a foreign country and I won't have my passport and I have to ship it to somebody in another country. But I did it because I developed these really strong connections and friendships. I feel as though I have friends who have very different lives and very different experiences, and I'm always rooting for them. But I'm also kind of the recipient of their time and energy and experience. I feel as though I have so much wealth of knowledge and experience I can call on, and that I am also happy to provide when I am called on to my friends.
Oh, I love what you just shared. I think that's the beauty of like traveling and also living in different countries. Like you said, even though you are not in that country anymore, you still have like your friends can support you, you can support them. That's all the meaning of traveling and living in a different country, have different experiences, and all that together makes you who you are right now.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. So people is the answer. Yeah.
So what do you want to achieve next?
Ooh, that's very, very interesting, provocative question. So after reading Designing Your Life, I realized that I should not do no, that's sorry, that is not true at all. I really read it because I'm actually at a point where I'm trying to decide, oh, okay, so what part of technology? Do I want to get into cybersecurity? Do I want to continue in the cloud? Do I want to do software development? Do I want to work at a big company? Do I want to work at a small company? Do I want it? So there's this dilemma now of like, I'm in this world and I'm happy I'm in this world. Now, which road or little path in this like web of paths should I pursue? I still have a lot to learn. It's almost like we have this saying in the Caribbean, and actually in a lot of other places, I'm realizing as well, that after you get your license, then you learn to drive, right? Like it's you don't actually learn to drive when you're getting your license. You kind of just get it to pass, but then you're like, okay, now I can learn to drive. I feel so once I get my degree, then I can start like really figuring out what I want to do with my career, what I want to do in tech. So my current plan is I graduate in June. I'm going to take a month or two to really kind of just step back and consider and look at the options and begin to explore what career options are out there for me in tech in Australia. I'll work at a company or organization, I hope, in the not too distant future. And then I can make a choice. But I think I have really good choices. I can stay in that company or in that industry or part of technology. I'm also really passionate now about developing personal projects. So I imagine one day in the future, I can see myself starting my own development design company or organization or like tech consulting firm and really building something out that way. I think these are all still open to me, even though I'm in my 30s and even though I'm making this transition. Now I'm like, ooh, what can I do? So it's really exciting. I'm really glad to be at this point now, just to finish this degree.
I'm excited for you too.
Thank you so much, guys. And you are both doing, I think, really, really important work. So thank you for having these conversations, not necessarily with me, like, although I'm really grateful that you're having the conversation with me, having these conversations in general in the space for, millennials, people in their mid 20s to mid 30s. Like, there are so many people who are asking these same questions about their life, about their career, about finances, about like relationships. Like, it's so great to know that none of us are alone, that we all have people to lean on and to learn from. And I hope that this is just another piece in that puzzle that you guys are building. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if anything, Vic and I learn the most out of these conversations that we have with each of our guests. So it's just been really wonderful and so valuable to be able to connect with our friends on another level that we don't normally connect on outside of these settings.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jayson. Well, it was wonderful to have you here with us on our podcast. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for today's episode as well. Stay tuned on Wednesdays for more conversations with interesting guests, and we'll chat soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.